This is the ASUS ROG Swift 32-inch OLED monitor, and it might actually be the single best display that I've ever owned. Hear me out though, because this thing is actually really sick. I do have an LG C1 OLED, which introduced me to OLED TVs about 5 years ago, and it's still kicking. And I have a Samsung G8 OLED, which is an ultra-wide monitor that I've used for the last couple of years before giving it to my wife. It was good for me, but I needed something that checked more boxes and something that would sort of fit my workflow better, but also allowed me to have a lot more fun with it, being a degenerate and being able to play some games. There's a few things that a new display here needed to check off. It had to be 16:9 so that I don't see any letterboxings on the sides when using a console, since I do some console related content from time to time. It had to be 4K, since pretty much everything these days supports it. And I do like the extra screen real estate that 4K gives you for when I am working. And it also needed a higher refresh rate. Not something that I wanted, but it is a must for me these days. Most importantly though, and maybe this one's even a little more selfish, I do have a bias towards OLED for monitors, and this is something that I stare at for multiple hours out of the day. So having a nice looking and bright image with those perfect black levels honestly makes sitting at the desk a lot more inviting, even if I'm just scrolling through Twitter with my morning coffee. Which is why I asked ASUS if they could send this thing over, but there's no contract, there's no payment. This video is not sponsored like in any way. ASUS does not have their grubby hands on what I'm gonna say in this video. I do get to keep the display, but even if ASUS hadn't sent it, this is the one that I was gonna buy, which is the only reason I asked them for this panel, because why would I use something that I don't want or that I wouldn't have went out on my own to get anyway? So with all that out of the way, before we go further, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. I just want to say thank you so much for the support that you've been showing me. We are almost at 65,000 subscribers, which is just insane to me. I can't believe where we are at, and thank you. Thank you for watching these videos. Anyways, let's run down some specs on this bad boy because this thing is actually kind of crazy. This is the PG32UCDM. I hate the way that everyone has these model numbers, but PG32UCDM, that's this one right here. It's a 4K panel at 32 inches with a 240 Hz refresh rate. It's VESA certified for HDR10. It covers 99% of the DCI-P3 color gamut, and it has a response time of only 0.03 milliseconds. Now, this is a QD OLED panel, so it's just like the older Samsung display that I was using, but a lot newer with better technology, and it's a better panel. So it's not just like it, but in terms of like the QD part, it is. And hear me out for a second because this can be kind of complicated, but essentially a QD OLED panel uses blue LEDs with a quantum dot color filter rather than white LEDs. So it's much brighter and it actually reduces the risk of burn-in. I'm not someone who's like super picky about OLED or really thinks that burn-in is like a big deal. I've used a ton of panels. Even the iPad that I'm using right now is OLED. I've logged a ton of hours on these displays. I've not even seen like a glimpse of burn-in being realized on any panel that I have. So I don't know, take that as you will. But if you do care about that, ASUS does have their Display Widget Center app. There's a ton of settings for OLED care, and the display does prompt you every once in a while to run the pixel cleaning setup. Though on this monitor, I actually don't think that I've ever done that. And again, I really don't think that it's something that should be a concern. But if this is something that you're going to use for like 5-10 years, obviously do your due diligence and make sure that you're, keeping the display clean, whatever that means. I think the concerns about burn-in are like genuinely very overblown on new displays. And I don't think that's something that should hold you back from buying an OLED panel for your monitor. Anyways though, this monitor does have a ton of ports. There's a DisplayPort 1.4, 2 HDMI 2.1 ports, a USB-C port which can do display and 90 watts of power delivery. It does also have a USB hub with a built-in KVM so that you don't need to switch your peripherals out if you have a 2-computer setup. And of course, this is an ASUS product, so it does have RGB addressable lights on here, which I'm not gonna lie, is pretty cool. Do I ever see them because the monitor's backed up against the wall? Not really, but it's it's there and it's cool. I don't know. The monitor also does have an included VESA stand, which is genuinely a really nice stand. It's just not something that I could use here at my house, and I definitely am not using that as an excuse for the fact that I forgot it at my studio. And now you're probably sitting here thinking, wait, is this guy using this overkill display with a Mac? Yes, I am. So I do all of my editing on Final Cut Pro on my 14-inch M4 Pro MacBook Pro. Holy Pro. I have the MacBook connected with a Thunderbolt dock from CalDigit, which is a one cable solution. And then from the dock, it's connected to DisplayPort to the ROG Swift OLED. And yes, it works actually perfectly. The native 4K resolution is really nice because it gives me a ton of screen real estate. Even though this is a 16:9 panel and not an ultra wide like my last monitor, I actually have a lot more when it comes to the working area, both vertically and horizontally, because of the bump in resolution. And even though this is running through a Thunderbolt dock with a ton of other peripherals connected, the MacBook is actually able to still take advantage of the 240 Hz refresh rate, which is really nice. Now, obviously I don't have a gaming PC here set up at the moment, which would obviously make more sense for a display like this since it's positioned as a gaming monitor with that lower response time and that higher refresh rate. But I've been using high refresh rate displays since Alienware released the 240 Hz 1080p panel back in 2017, and genuinely ever since using that display, I can't go back to anything like sub 120, sub 165. It is a night and day difference, and it's something that like I kind of wish I wasn't spoiled with at, you know, a younger age, because now I'm just kind of cooked with these expensive panels, but it is what it is, and it genuinely does make a big difference. The motion clarity, even now more so that it's OLED, is insane. There's like no ghosting. Everything is tack sharp in movement, and I've noticed that it helped a lot with eye strain if you're someone that's reading a lot of text and scrolling through a ton of documents. The panel is basically perfect when it comes to its color accuracy, and that does have its benefits for me when it comes to color grading my footage or editing my photos. And typically with OLED monitors, I have to run them at their highest brightness, but it wasn't until writing this that I realized I've never even adjusted the display brightness on this thing. It's still at 65%, which is kind of crazy, because this panel, hold on. There we go, my Mac fell asleep. This panel is really bright. I was actually kind of shocked when I realized that it was only at 65%, because there's some times where this thing can be probably too bright. You can also turn on uniform brightness, which makes the entire panel's brightness the same instead of giving you hot spots or dim zones. And overall for work, this thing is a beast. But I do play games, I do some console reviews here and there, and I often have something on my desk that can take advantage of this thing, like the PS5 Pro. Because this thing is an HDMI 2.1 panel, it's compatible with the PS5 Pro, even down to the VRR support with G-Sync and FreeSync. Keep in mind the PS5 Pro doesn't support 240 Hz, but in every other way, this thing is insane for the PlayStation. I play a lot of competitive shooters like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and so on, and I think that this is the best I've ever seen them look. But rather than laying back and sitting on my couch far away from my TV and being at a disadvantage, I have a massive, beautiful monitor right in front of my eyes. Now, this is where I can really feel, or I guess not feel, the response time. If you've ever used an older LCD TV or something like that, the gray to gray response times of an OLED is such a weird transition. It's like if you've removed input latency entirely, and it genuinely does make a massive difference to how the game actually feels when you're playing it. This display is not only suited though for story mode games and making things look nice, but it's also something that genuinely gives you a competitive advantage in those titles that need it. And that's why I love this thing. For me, it's a no compromise monitor. It's fantastic for when I do video editing, and it's the best display in the house hands down for video games when I do have time to kill. It's also just at this point a staple of my setup, something that I interact with on a daily basis, and that's why this monitor is one that I would have purchased anyways with zero regrets. So anyways, thank you ASUS for sending this display over. If you want to see an updated video about my desk setup where I can go a little bit more in depth to everything, let me know in the comments down below and I'll get to doing that. But if you've watched all the way through, a like and sub to the channel goes a really long way. If you could tell at this point, I'm probably like mentally drained because I feel like whimsical right now. Is that even the right word? Whimsical? Anyways, drop a turtle emoji if you've watched all the way through. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.